There we go. All right, we're back. Yeah, folks can just keep coming on in. We're going to go ahead and get started. So again, our next theme is real actions. And we're going to start off with a great conversation called Each One Teach One. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just welcome my panelists to just come on stage here. So just come on up. Yep, come on up. Give them a hand. Yep. And I'm going to introduce them. Yep. Yep, just join real quickly. Yep. There we are. Cool. There we go. All right, so Each One Teach One is the title of this conversation, and this just gets into the value that comes and the beauty that comes of just the teaching and the learning experience. You can teach and learn from any given age, any given lived experience, and there's value and power in that. You know, life is a journey, and hopefully you're learning and teaching for as long as you possibly can, because that gives you, in my opinion, the most enriching experience with your lived journey. So we're just going to be getting into that here for a second. And so I'm excited to just introduce my panelists. So I'm going to introduce each one, and I'm going to shoot them a quick question to get ourselves started. And so we have Daryl Butler. I'll go from here to here. Daryl Butler, you all know him, but Vice President of Marketing, Platforms, and Devices. So that is Daryl. Yeah. Yep. And then real quick, Daryl, who is Daryl Butler?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm learning as I go. Daryl Butler, I think, is a grounded, centered individual who has an appreciation for the role I play as a marketer, but also the role I play as a human. Right? There are functional things that I consider myself to be an expert at. That is the day-to-day work. But quite frankly, that doesn't matter if it doesn't translate. Mm-hmm. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about and working on how to translate what I know and what I do for others to benefit from.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's Daryl. All right. Next person we have is Suzanne French, Director, Strategy and Operations. Give her a big welcome. There we are. And again, Suzanne, same question. Who is Suzanne French?
I should have skipped a seat. Have to follow DB there. So Suzanne French is this little girl from New Orleans, Louisiana, who was often told she could not, no matter what it was. And now I know without a doubt I'm the same little girl who can. And I can do anything that I put my mind to. And I can sit at any table with anyone and have a dialogue. My mission in life is to build as I climb, right? As I go up, I want to know who's coming behind me and how am I helping to bring them along the way. My main fight in life is about fairness and justice. So if you ever hear my name, you'll probably hear those two words as well.
All right, that's Suzanne French. Okay, yeah. All right, next we have Jeanine Banks. Jeanine is a Vice President and General Manager, Google Cloud Developer X. And so, same question, Jeanine.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's amazing to be up here with all of you all. Can't wait to have this conversation. So who is Jeanine Banks? Jeanine Banks is who and where I'm from. My mother, Ethel Walker, she was orphaned as a kid when she was 9 years old. And she basically grew up on the streets and raised us in East New York, Brooklyn. I'm one of 8. And so as that person who heard on the television back in the early 80s that I lived in the most dangerous city in America, I was determined to be dangerous in my own way. And so fast forward to 2025, I'm still being dangerous.
That's what's up. Yeah, Jeanine. All right. Yeah, and then rounding out our panel is Jewel Burks Solomon. She's a managing partner at Collab Capital. And Jewel, who is Jewel?
Thank you for having me. So excited to be back in my old stomping grounds of Google. I am a purpose-driven leader. I am a creative thinker and an artist. And I really appreciate this question because it's often hard to think about who you are without your orientation or your connection to other people. So I try really hard to think about the things that make me who I am and not what I would typically say, which is I'm Makai's mom and I'm Zach's wife. It's really a thought-provoking exercise to think about who you are without all of the people that you support and who you help. So those core things that make me me are about the fact that I believe I have a divine purpose on my life, and I'm an artist and a thinker and a curious person.
Yeah, awesome, excellent. That is Jewel. Yeah. Then real quickly before we dive into the questions, I'm super excited that you're here, Jewel. We do know that you have a big meeting at 2 o'clock, and so we're going to have our conversation, a great time, but we're going to excuse Jewel at the appropriate time for that. And we're going to make this time valuable as much as we can. And so with that, the opening question that I have, this gets into just lessons, all right? So I'm curious about if any one of you can just briefly share a lesson that you've learned that you will never forget. It can be work, life, school, whatever. What is a lesson from your life that you will never forget?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and take a swing at that
Go
one.
ahead.
The meta point is there are no guarantees. Early in life, I thought I had it all figured out. The family, the dog, the picket fence, the great job, all that kind of stuff. And literally, it all fell apart within months of one another. Lost a job, family fell apart, found myself broke and destitute. And I realized over a course of about a year's time that I had built a house of cards. And the lesson that came from that is to, well, one, don't build your house with cards.
Part one, yep.
Build your house with a strong foundation. Understand that the things don't really matter. In the ultimate grand scheme of things, stuff doesn't matter. What matters is family. What matters is your walk in faith. What matters is having purpose. I think you used the word purpose. And since that time, and over the course of the last, call it 12, 15 years, I've taken a different approach to the way that I've developed. And it's because I understood that what I thought I had got stripped away in a heartbeat. And I had to redefine who I was as a result of not having those things. And that gave me a very grounding purpose now, where I don't think about those things. Yeah, they're nice, they're cool, all that good stuff, but those don't define me anymore. My worth, my value, my principles are really defined by doing what I'm doing right now. Being able to have these types of conversations, sharing something that might be of value to somebody in this room. That's what the lesson I've learned and how I'm applying it today.
That's a pretty good lesson. Definitely is. Any others?
I want to have one lesson from my early undergraduate days. I got this hot shot job, and I thought I was all that in a bag of chips. And in a meeting, someone really just set me off. And I went back to my office and sent out what I will never do in life ever again, no matter what, was that screaming, scaling email about why I was so good and so right. And the lesson that I learned was that all the currency or credibility that I had built was destroyed with 27 strokes of the keyboard. And so if there's a lesson that you could learn, it's harder to rebuild than it is to build. And when you are building, take a few minutes, take a deep breath, figure out what's next, and then send the appropriate email to the right folks at the right time.
Wow. Okay. There we go. Ooh. Yeah, we're cooking now. We're cooking. Yeah.
You can give us a notepad to write these notes. My God. I was thinking about your question when you asked Larry, and I'm like, wow, which is so many lessons. I'm getting up there. But one that I, will never forget is some time ago I worked at General Electric. And when I first joined, I came from a tech company. I was at IBM, so I'm going into industrial. I've never been in an industrial company, a manufacturing company, different culture than I had ever seen at that point in my career. So I'm just starting out. I have to go to my first meeting in what they called the boardroom. It wasn't like where the board of directors met, but it was called the boardroom. But it was like a boardroom. It had this long wooden table and wooden walls and all these super smart people sitting around it, and they were just talking. They were talking so fast. I was thinking to myself, how do I get into this conversation? Oh, do I know enough to be in this conversation? Oh, wait, will I say something stupid in this conversation? And so I just sat there for a while. It was about a 2-hour meeting. Different people were presenting, and I sat there. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour goes by. There's the internal instant messaging, and my manager, he was very respected in the company. He's sitting at the other end of the table, and I noticed the blinking of my instant chat. And I finally kind of peek at it in this meeting, and he said to me 2 words. Say something. And I was like, oh, I've been sitting here this whole time. The meeting is almost over.
Yeah.
And I don't usually want to say something just to say something. But what that taught me is that if I'm at the table, occupy it, take up the space, and let my perspective be known. And so I thought about it, and I did have a perspective. And I offered it up. It went fine. No, nothing fell down. I wasn't escorted out of the room. But that notion of say something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why have me in the room in the
Yeah.
future?
Yeah.
So that's the lesson I've always carried back with me.
Yeah, powerful lesson. And as a side note to that lesson, we're actually going to be talking a little bit more about that in our last theme when we talk about imposter syndrome. We're going to unpack that. And you actually started to open that, which is excellent, excellent. And so, Jules, same thing. Lesson that you'll never forget.
A lesson that I find myself having to learn over and over again. I'm trying to get it, but it is trust, but verify. And I think the trust being first in that sentence is important because whatever you do, for all the things that I've done in my career, it's always been about building relationships with people, being open-hearted with people. And trust is required for relationships to develop. But verify is also critical because in order to build long-term relationships, you have to make sure that the people that you're in a relationship with are worthy of the time and attention that you have to put in. So that's something I've been a part of a lot of different partnerships and I really got the trust part down, but I didn't get the verification part down, and that caused me trouble. So those two things together is something that is really critical to keep in mind as you're growing in your career, you're building partnerships, you're building relationships, making sure that you're doing your due diligence, but still keeping an open heart.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And so now we want to switch gears because everybody in this room has either been to school or is currently in school, and school is very valuable, right? And so this question, and we're going to pick 2 of you for this. Suzanne, I'm going to start with you, and then Jeanine will come back to you for this one, and then Daryl and Jill will come back to you for the other part of this question. So the first part of this is, what is a critical professional skill that you learned that was not taught to you in the classroom? Skill that was not taught. Now, school's important, students, so don't disenroll, don't do that, But the motivation behind this question is that school is, important, but when you graduate, when you finish, there's like a whole nother level of learning that's about to come your way, if it hasn't come your way already. And so we just wanted to unpack that. Yeah.
That's a great question. I think school gave me knowledge, right? That's what it does. It gives you knowledge. What I didn't really know how to do well was build relationships, right? And influence those relationships. So it's one thing to have a relationship with someone. It's another thing to be vulnerable with someone. And it's another thing to persuade someone to believe what you believe in that way. So all the knowledge I had that now what do? I know how to do it. But now, how do I convince you to do what I want you to do? Oh, they didn't tell me that. So then I had to observe, right, to figure out as I'm in these rooms, DB did that, cool. Let me go set up some time with DB to figure out, what did you do? What was the foundation of that? How did you, they just slid right on over to your point of view instantly. How do you do that? So that was a skill that I had to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think to serve.
Serve.
Because, you know, as you're coming up in school, you're getting a lot of technical information, you're getting even skill-based information, knowledge, as you said, Suzanne. But what's interesting about it is you don't actually learn how to serve others in a professional environment. You may be engaged in a non-professional environment of service, but what that looks like in a professional environment, there's a variation to how it looks in a social and personal environment. Yeah. And so the specific steps involved to understanding the process of serving, it's tied into relationships as well. So when you asked the question, I thought about that as well. And so that's definitely something that I've learned. In the professional setting, you're serving your team. Because I think, you know, you can come up thinking, oh, I'm the boss. I get to tell people what to do. But actually, if you're going to be effective and if you're going to inspire others, you need to actually serve them. And so what does that look like when your ego is high and flying and you've been told you got there because all these great things you've done, and no, you didn't realize that, oh, I have to serve. And then there's also serving peers that you work with, sideways, as well as other stakeholders, of course, in the organization. And if that organization is large, like at Google, you really have to spend the time understanding what people need and how you can help them achieve the things that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, service, yeah. One thing at Google, we have our different profile pages that, you know, if you want to look somebody up, get in touch with them. We have this thing at the top next to our name, and it's, the way I was explained to me when I was started is that it's your 3-word mission. So I thought about it for a couple of days, and then I wrote down, serve others first is my 3-word mission. So Google folks, if you look me up, that's what it's saying, literally right now, is it. And so, yeah, so thank you for that. And now for Daryl and Jewel, this next question is, what is a critical professional skill that you always pass on to someone else? And while you're thinking about that for a second, the motivation behind that is that, again, to the title of this segment is Each One Teaching One. So I have a number of different things that I always make a point. If somebody wants, and I've actually had some of these conversations with you today, is you know, when somebody wants to connect or just learn, there's an inventory of just key things that I'm like, okay, I've learned this early on. Let me pass this on to you. Let me make a point to do this. And so that's the motivation behind that question. And Jewel, we'll start with you on that.
Sure. I would say the art of being pleasantly persistent. That's something that has served me well in my life and in my career. And I often find myself sharing that with other people because I think a lot of times people expect if they send one email or do one touch point that they should get instant response and the conversation should be able to carry on. And candidly and honestly, that's just not how it goes. And I've found that I've now at this point raised over $100 million, and the only way that I was able to do that,
yeah, there you go. That's awesome.
is being very persistent, pleasantly persistent, and also understanding the context in terms of why I'm reaching out to someone, what can I offer that's beneficial to them, and framing that appropriately. So I think in terms, and particularly, I know there's a lot of young folks. I see a Howard sweatshirt back there, HU.
There's some HU.
So I think, you know, in terms of how young people, I have 4 younger brothers, and I have this conversation with them all the time about their expectations versus the reality of how professional settings work and what people can deliver. And if your standpoint is, I'm gonna follow up until I get an answer, yes or no, and I'm not gonna be brash about it or, you know, have an attitude about it, this is just kind of table stakes the way the game goes, I think you'll get a lot further. And that's what I found. There's people that it took them years of me following up, giving them updates, sharing our progress. Even internally, when I was here at Google, the big thing that I worked on in my last stint here was the Founders Fund model, Black Founders Fund, Latino Founders Fund. And it took a few tries of me going to internal stakeholders, explaining to them why this is going to be a value add to Google and what Google's going to get out of it, as well as what it's going to offer to this community of founders. And I had to be very persistent in that pursuit. So that would be it. I have had to remind myself all the time of how important it is to continue to follow up with folks. And I think young people and people at any stage of their career, that's something that I like to pass on to them as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Daryl.
I'm gonna drop two. The first one is something a mentor told me many, many years ago. Think two, take one. And what I was at the time trying to figure out is, what's my next move? And if anybody in here plays chess, you don't play chess thinking about just your next move. You're thinking 2, 3, 4 moves ahead. That should be the way that you govern your career. Think two, take one. So wherever you are, think 2 steps out. Where do you want to be 2 steps from now? And then what are the things that you need to know in order to take the first step? You take the first step, think 2 more out. Figure out what you need to know, take that step, and keep going. That leads to a bit of a progressive approach to the way that you grow your career. So think 2, take 1. The next one I'll leave you with is, this came from Learn the Hard Way, but I share this with people to this day. I went into a meeting, I was at Beats by Dre at the time, and there was a bunch of celebs and people like that, a guy named Jimmy Iovine at the time. We met at his house, and I was like, oh, this is bad. I'm it, right? I walk in the room, I got my deck ready, I'm ready to present. Jimmy pulls me aside, he says, sometimes it's just as important to be the couch in the room. And at first I was like, what? I got stuff to say, I got things to, But his point was, just listen. Read the room, and then understand where your contribution is going to be most impactful. So we walk into rooms often, whether that be in classrooms or otherwise, and we think we got to say it, we got to do it, we got to make our point. Sometimes it's best to just be the couch in the room for a period of time until you figure out, first of all, who's the audience, what's the tenor of the room, and then make your decisions about the things that you need to say that are going to be most impactful. So first one, think 2, take 1. Second one, sometimes just be the couch in the room.
Yeah.
Daryl, on that first one, that's like exponential growth. You thinking 2 every time? That's just scaling. I'm just looking at charts right now.
Up and to the right. That's what it is.
Up and to the right.
Yeah, excellent. All right, now, the last thing we'll do is spend some time on the whole idea of mentors, allies, coaches, sponsors, very valuable roles to play. I hope everybody has some form of these in your life. If you don't, I highly encourage it. But I wanted to just spend some time just unpacking that, because one might think, are they all the same? Coach on one day, a mentor on another day. Should you be all things to all people? Just wanted to unpack that just for a moment. This is just a conversation. And so now I'll just start with, are they all the same? And I'll let anybody jump on that one. Okay, yeah.
Absolutely not. A sponsor is somebody who's going to put you on.
Okay.
A sponsor knows the person to talk to get you the face time that you need to do the thing that you want to do.
Okay. Yeah.
A mentor offers perspective. You got a challenge, you got a problem, you got an opportunity. They're the ones that are going to actually help you shape how you might want to think about the approach. To me, those are 2 different things. Now, one person can be both.
More than one, true.
Right? The coach is going to actually give you the play-by-play.
Okay. Yeah.
Do this, then do that, then do the other thing. These are the necessary steps you're going to have to employ in order to accomplish your goal. Again, the same person can be all 3 of those,
things.
But they do serve different purposes, and they can be different people. So even as you think about your network, ask yourself the question, is this a coach? Is this a sponsor? Or is this a mentor? And that'll help you frame the network so that you are networking with, I always say this, network with intention. Don't just build a bunch of people around you I mean, sometimes you want to have angels around that you can just tap into, but sometimes you need to have a definition for the role that they're going to serve in your life.
Yeah.
Who's going to coach, who's going to actually mentor, and who's going to sponsor.
Yeah, yeah. Others, yeah.
One thing I'd add too is one way to know who is in front of you or who you're talking to in that moment is what they say, what they do in that conversation. So for example, you know you're talking to a coach if it seems like they are just peppering you with questions. They are asking you questions, they're listening, you're doing most of the talking, and you're like, is this person helping me or not? But what you don't realize is that the questions they're asking you are helping you. Imagine you're in a house, and there are hallways and corridors and rooms, and the questions that the coach is asking you is helping you navigate and figure out which way you're going to go and which way to turn, which room you're going to go in and walk out or go in and shut the door. And so you'll notice a lot of questions when you're talking to your coach. When you're talking to your mentor actually may talk more than you in that conversation. Because like Daryl said, they're offering perspective, and they are also sharing lessons that they've learned from trying things and doing things, and they're passing that on to you. So make sure you have your notebook out, you're taking detailed notes, you're taking action items, you're following up to really apply those things, because you're gonna get some amazing jewels in those conversations. And then what I say about sponsors, see, you don't really ask someone to be your sponsor. You don't, hey, this has been great, we've talked 3 times, can you sponsor me? What usually happens is that you don't know who they are. They don't tell you necessarily that they are sponsoring you, so you really have to read the cues of, is this person potentially a sponsor? And one thing you'll notice with sponsors is that they may be asking about your results.
Oh, results and outcomes.
Because they may not have close contact all the time to know exactly what you're delivering, what impact you're making, what skill set you now developed. So they're asking for those results. Well, how did that turn out? What was the growth? What was this? What skill you got from that? And you're answering these questions like, oh man, they're grilling me. So if you're feeling a little grilled, that's probably a sponsor, because they're getting some data points. So when they do in those rooms where you're not in, but they are, they can rely on those data points to make the case that you should get that meeting, or you should get that role, or you should at least get a conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to make that point about sponsors typically being folks who have access that you may not have at this point in your life or in your career, but the posture that you should have is that you want people to have the information so that they can make a case for you in places where you're not there, and hopefully bring you in to those opportunities and to those rooms. So what I think about is, to your point, you may not always know who the sponsors are, but you can make sure that you uplift the work that you're doing, the progress that you're making, get it on people's desks so that they can have the information they need to make a case for you. That's something that, it's actually a lesson I learned at Google, where I was doing great work, but I wasn't really telling people about it. And that made it difficult for people who maybe could have been great sponsors for me, but my mindset was, if I just keep my head down and do the work, but that, you got to get out of that, because people need to know the work that you're doing. So that's one thing I would just add about the sponsor piece. On mentors, one thing that I've also learned is, you may have people in mind that you want to be your mentors, but they may be at capacity. They may not have time to really pour into you in the ways that you need them to or want them to. Because of our digital environment, a lot of the people that you probably want to be your mentors have podcasts, have videos where they've talked a lot about, the different aspects of their journey and their path and given advice, sat on panels, et cetera. So one thing I encourage people to do is think about the people that, in an ideal world, you would love for them to be your mentors, but maybe you don't have that one-on-one access. See what they've put out there, because a lot of the questions that you would probably ask them, it's likely that someone's asked them now on a podcast or in a YouTube video. And don't forego the opportunity to learn from them just because you can't have that one-on-one coffee chat.
Yeah, and that actually gets into the actual question I wanted to insert into this is like, how do you get a mentor, a sponsor, a coach, all those things there. But Suzanne, any additional thoughts on this?
You want me to talk about how you get one?
Yeah, either how to get one or
Yeah,
to
just
add
go
on to
and
what
ask.
we're talking about. Either or.
So generally, if I find someone that I really like their style or what they do, I generally just go up and introduce myself. I think I told you guys yesterday, I always have my elevator speech ready. So it's like, hi, I'm Suzanne French. I lead this. I forecast a 92% lift in our belonging score, and we actually achieved 98. I love the way you influence the room. Can I sit down and have a one-on-one with you to talk about how I might learn to do that? That's my 5 second to someone who's really busy, and you'll generally get a yes or no, and then I like Jules, that pleasant pest, keep following up, because then I'll say, hey, we had a talk last week, I didn't hear back, I know you're really busy, still want to talk about how I might influence. Then I'll put it on my calendar to follow up a week later. Sponsors, like I ran into folks, like Jeanine said, that I feel, oh, you must be a sponsor because now you're asking me about something I did. Like, it's like, hey, I heard you did that. What was the result of that? And then, boom, here go my little 5 talking points that I have for that. And then there it is, so I know that they're a sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
you talked about learning, and as you request that access, you point out what you want to learn.
Yes.
And I think that's so critical, is thinking about the things that you want to learn. Because what you don't want to have happen too often, it happens to all of us, but not too often, is you're not ready to share why this person should spend time with you.
Yeah.
And so I think this aspect of learning, chances are you can learn something from them, but it's also great if you have some 3 or 4 things that you're like, hey, I'm working on this thing and I saw how you did X. I would love to learn from you. And that is a great opener because it also is not arresting. It's like,
Yes.
okay, like don't ask me for a lot right out the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to learn, we
Yeah.
can have that conversation. I'm very interested. I think the other thing too is being curious. One of the things that I personally do is I think many of us, if not all of us, are on LinkedIn. And how many people, raise your hand, if you're connected to somebody on LinkedIn you don't know? Keep your hand up if you're connected to somebody on LinkedIn that you kind of know, but you've never talked to before. So what I do in my LinkedIn network, I'm like y'all, I'm not an exception. I have some of those, and I intentionally seek those folks out. And I'll say, we're connected, but we've never talked before. And I particularly look at those people who are regularly posting, or I may have seen them somewhere else at an event or speaking or on an investor earnings. It doesn't matter what level, or they could be the CEO or they are the assistant to so-and-so. I'll reach out. We're connected, but we've never spoken before. And that's another way that you can, particularly when it comes to mentoring, be able to seek those out.
Yeah.
That's a good
That's
idea.
powerful. Yeah. And so one thing we'll do here, we'll just do a quick round of final thoughts before we turn it over for some Q&A with everybody. And just want to be mindful of time. So Jewel, we'll start with you. Any just final thoughts about this topic?
On how to get mentors, when I was 22, 23, and I was starting my first company, I used the stalking route to get mentors. And that was, I had in mind, and this is I use for mentors and investors. It sometimes works, the same way, but I would find out the conferences that the people who I wanted to know would be speaking at. And this is me coming from, I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee. I worked at Google, but didn't really stay in Silicon Valley long enough. The first time I was at Google a couple times, but I wasn't in the Bay Area long enough to build out a really strong investor and mentor network on the startup side. So I really had to find creative ways to build the network that I needed to have in order to be successful in the things that I wanted to do, which was build a startup and ultimately sell it. And so I would find conferences, I would look at the list of speakers and find the people who I wanted to connect with. I would figure out ways to get into those conferences. Sometimes that would be volunteering. Sometimes it would be, finding someone who would be willing to sponsor a ticket for me or scrape together the money I had to get a ticket. I would go and sit in the front row of the sessions for the speakers or people that I wanted to connect with. I would ask a question, and then I would go to the line at the end of the session, follow up and say, hey, it's nice to meet you. I asked the question about blah, blah, blah. And I would have a very specific reason that I wanted to that point to connect with this person. Then I would get their email, their card. I would send them an email afterwards. I would follow up until I could get the next question answered. And I would drop it if I didn't get a response, but I would add them to an update list so that they were at least getting information about what I was building or the reason that I wanted to connect with them. And so that was the process that I used to sort of build up a network. And now, that's been well over a decade since I was in that seat. And what I recognized is that I know so many people from that time period of me kind of doing that rinse and repeat that I can now, they've seen my trajectory over the past decade plus. And they're like, man, I remember when you were doing X, Y, and Z, and now you've done all these other things. And so given that as a playbook, hopefully it's helpful. But I think one of the things that makes mentor relationships work is when people can see your progress over an extended period of time, see that you do the things that you said you were going to do. I was meeting people and I was like, I'm going to build a company and I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that and then I'm going to do this. And I'm sure a lot of people thought I was crazy at that time, but now when they're like, oh, dang, you really did do all the things you said you were going to do, that's what makes those relationships really work. So, and I'm looking at Kim because she's one of those people. I saw her, and I was like, I need to know her. So spent time over years and years and years, and now we have a close relationship. And so just giving that as evidence that it does work, if you put in the time and effort and do the follow-up as well. So that's what I would share on that.
Yeah, excellent. And we'll just pause real quick because I know you have your call here, so I want to respect your time. So, ladies and gentlemen, just thank you again to Jewel. Yeah, we definitely appreciate you. Yeah. And so again, just final thoughts before we open it up for Q&A. So we'll just keep going. So Jeanine, any final thoughts would you like to share?
Wow, I first of all, I prioritize a ton of time for mentoring sessions. I have at Google a link that has my office hours that anyone can, set up time. And my assistant, he's always looking at me like, okay, can you really take all of these? Because you got these other meetings. And I prioritize them because they're valuable to me too. It's not just like giving out. It's like I take in so much because every person is learning different things. They're in different generations. They are interested in different topics. They have been through different challenges. But one of the most rewarding things that I find is that being able to connect on a different level with someone. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken with someone and they started crying in the conversation because it's like, wow, somebody sees me and feels me and can like really see what I'm dealing with. And I'm like, and I've been through the same thing where I take that in and I'm like, whew, I needed that. I needed that. And so I just appreciate the opportunity that I have. I'm really grateful for the role that I have at Google, where we get to empower millions of people to build their businesses, people like Jewel and others, helping them build their products and being able to feed off of each other. One quick last thing I'll say is I get to speak at an annual conference we call Google I/O. And we have a program called the Tech Equity Collective, and we invite members of that program, which are largely Black and brown professionals, to come to I/O. We give out some of the seats for them to attend. And 1 year after the event, they said to me, wow, it was so amazing to see you up there. I needed to see somebody that looks like me up there. And I said, that's great, but guess what? This is the first time I've been on the stage and I saw 3 rows of Black people right up front. I say, you have no idea what you did for me.
Yeah. It's
I was
reciprocal.
like, I
Reciprocal,
was so
yeah.
confident in that presentation.
Yeah.
I was like, that's my people right here, right here. And so I just wanted to share that is a lot of value you can give to the person that's mentoring you, as well as what they're giving to you.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, Suzanne.
I would just say, don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes our pride or our ego may get in the way because we feel we have to know everything. And I would remind you, the greatest thing about being a child is the curiosity of a child. And so as an adult, if you can stay curious about things that you don't know and ask for help, that will take your career, as we say, high and to the right all the time.
Nice. Yeah. Close this out, Daryl. Yep.
Exponential.
Just going to have to plus one to what Jeanine said, and that is, even after yesterday's session, I ended up having a good conversation with a few folks all the way into the evening, just in the lobby of the hotel even. And when I finally kind of started to settle down and put things in their place, I realized how fulfilling experiences like this are, right? Because I can remember sitting in that seat and absorbing these conversations. And I realized how enriching it is, right? But what I also put into perspective is that our dailies can be riddled with all kinds of shades of gray. There are never any easy answers. Everything is always a level of complexity. And we as leaders have to learn how to rest in long spans of complexity. And what we need is just as much as what this audience in this room needs, and that is the gift of clarity. Every now and then, we need the gift of clarity. And when we have conversations like this, whether it's sitting in this seat or sitting in the seat that you're in, that's what comes from this. And that is soul-filling for me. So when the opportunity to share comes up, I don't look at it as a chore or an obligation. I look at it as an opportunity. Something that is actually going to fill my cup as much as it might fill someone else's.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. And so with that, now we're going to turn it over to you. Any questions? And quick time check. We have about 5-ish minutes. So one question is what I'm told. So who has the best question in the room? No pressure.
He has the mic.
That's a lot
Here
of
we go,
questions now.
HU.
But hello, everybody. My name is Osei Asene. I'm a senior at Howard University in the business school. And my question is, well, all of you talked about like mentorship and maintaining relationships, right, and things in that area. And all of you are also senior level inside your career. So I just want to know, when it comes to like maintaining relationships, like from like the personal standpoint, how do you balance like, or teeter on that line of like all your conversations always being about career-based things, or like helping people about their career and those type of conversations in that area, like especially for personal relationships, like how do you balance that line of mixing it together, and how do you show up for people in a way that's not always about mentorship or career stuff, just like about life, you know?
I love this question. One of the things that, thank you for your question. When people may approach me for mentoring opportunities or ask me if I would like to be their mentor, and I give them this disclaimer. I say, I don't know from a schedule standpoint it can work out, but I'm very eager to learn if there's an opportunity here for us. But I warn you that if you're trying to figure out how to get promoted, if you are trying to figure out how to get the next job, if you want to figure out how to get your presentation better improved, we'll get there, but that's not really where I focus my energy as a mentor. I focus my energy on you as a human. And as a human, you have life going on. And work is just part of your whole life. And from so many conversations with mentees, I find that what's affecting them in their choices and how they see risk or opportunity at work is something else in life. Something with themselves, their family members, their friends, their communities, just society at large. And that is so much fun to have those conversations. And when we're both willing to be vulnerable and be human beings and go from side to side, slipping on all kinds of topics, I'm here for it. That's the best kind. If you just really want to talk about work and you're really trying to get to that next thing, maybe catch me once or twice, but maybe not a regular mentoring relationship.
Great. Yeah, and with that, we got one more? Okay, we got time for one more. Go ahead.
All right, I'll try to make it quick. Hi, my name is Amir Abraham. I'm a student at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And I just want to ask for some personal advice. I've noticed that even in environments like this, when I tend to tell people I'm a freshman, I kind of get dismissed in a way where it's like, oh, you've got time. But I'm a big believer of it's never too early to start. So I wanted to ask for some personal advice on how to be taken seriously when trying to look for a mentor when everyone just tells you you have time.
I had to follow that, but go ahead. Any thoughts?
Well, if that's
We
the
both looking at Daryl.
I got to
don't
follow,
know
but go ahead. Go ahead.
Daryl?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Daryl's opinion, obviously. My disclaimer. If that's the response you get, move on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Move on, right? There are people, whether they're in policy making or, strategic positions, senior positions, or anywhere else, right? I have mentors of mine that are younger than me because that's how I keep a foot in the street, right? I mean, from where I sit, I can't do some of the things that younger people can do anymore. So the idea of having a foot in the street, having a foot in the boardroom is important to me. So I make sure that I'm selective about the folks that I surround myself with. So should you, right? Not everybody's going to fit. Right? So this idea of not having the time, okay, thank you for your time. I'm moving on. Because there are rooms of people who do have the time and are interested and are willing to chop it up with you across a number of different vectors, right? So you can be just as selective about the folks you invite into your life
True. Yeah.
as mentors are about how they are going to support and provide time to others. So that would be the first thing I'd say is move on.
That's great. All right, and with that, we're going to go. We got time for one more? Okay, we'll wrap it up just to keep us on time here because next is our breakout. So with that, I just want to give you a big thank you again. So thank you again for that. And,